At 2:13 in the morning, my daughter screamed from her crib, and 1 minute of our security footage disappeared. That was the moment I stopped thinking of the noise in my yard as a raccoon. My name is Melissa Carter. I was 44 then, a logistics officer at Fort Liberty, living in a 3-bedroom brick house on the west side of Fayetteville, North Carolina. Nothing fancy. Beige carpet, a creaky back step, and a mailbox that leaned a little to the left no matter how many times I fixed it. My husband Daniel was supposedly in Atlanta for a regional sales meeting. I was home alone with our 1-year-old daughter Emma. The noise came first. A soft scrape near the fence. Then 2 careful steps across the patio. I sat up in bed and listened. Before I could reach for the lamp, Emma began crying. Not fussing. Not that tired little whimper babies make when they lose a pacifier. She was screaming hard enough to cough between breaths. I pulled on sweatpants, took my pistol from the lockbox, and moved down the hall. "Mommy's coming," I whispered. I checked Emma's room first. She was standing in her crib, red-faced, gripping the rail. Her window was shut. The closet was empty. I lifted her against my shoulder and felt her tiny fingers close around my t-shirt. Then I cleared the rest of the house. Kitchen, laundry room, guest bedroom, garage. Every door was locked, every window latched. Outside the yard looked empty under the yellow porch light. I kept Emma on my hip and opened the security app on my phone. We had 4 cameras: front porch, driveway, back patio, and nursery hallway. All 4 were still online. I scrolled backward. 2:12 a.m. The patio was empty. 2:13 a.m. static. 2:14 a.m. empty again. I replayed it 3 times. Same result. Exactly 60 seconds of gray snow and a low electronic hiss. Emma had stopped crying, but she would not let go of me. "Okay," I said quietly, "that's not normal." I stayed awake until sunrise with every light in the house on and a dining chair wedged under the back doorknob. At 7:30, I called in late-packed Emma's diaper bag, removed the DVR from the hall cabinet, and drove to Sandhills Security Solutions near Skybo Road. The technician was a thin man named Leon with silver-framed glasses and a coffee mug that said, "World's Okayest Dad." He worked on the file for almost an hour. Then the video appeared. The recovered clip was dark and grainy. At first I saw only the nursery door opening by inches. Then a shoulder moved through the frame. The person paused beside the crib long enough to make Emma's little moon and stars mobile begin turning. Leon leaned closer to the screen. His hand stopped on the mouse. All the color drained from his face. "Ma'am," he said barely above a whisper, "take your daughter and leave, right now." I stepped beside him and looked. On the screen, someone was standing inside Emma's bedroom, and whoever it was had a key to my house. I didn't remember driving away from the security shop. 1 minute I was standing beside Leon staring at the frozen image on his monitor. The next I was buckling Emma into her car seat outside while my hands shook so badly I had to try twice. The picture wasn't perfectly clear. The person's face stayed hidden in the darkness. But one thing was obvious. Someone had been inside my daughter's bedroom. Someone who hadn't broken a window or kicked in a door. Someone who had walked in. I pulled over in the parking lot of a Food Lion and called 911. 2 deputies from the Cumberland County Sheriff's Office met me at the house about 20 minutes later. Deputy Harris was probably in his late 50s, calm and polite. His partner looked much younger. They watched the recovered footage twice. "It's definitely disturbing," Harris admitted, "but the file's been damaged. We can't positively identify anybody." "So that's it?" I asked. "Some stranger stands over my baby's crib and I just wait," he sighed. "No, ma'am. We'll file a report, increase patrols in the area, and have crime scene technicians dust the doors and windows." "They won't find anything." "Why do you say that?" "Because whoever came in had a key." He didn't answer. Instead, he made another note in his notebook. Before leaving, he suggested changing every lock and checking the smoke detectors for hidden cameras. I appreciated that advice more than I appreciated the report. By noon, I was sitting in a locksmith's office. By 3, every lock on the house had been replaced. Still, I couldn't bring myself to stay there. I packed enough clothes for Emma and me and drove an hour north to my older sister Rachel's house in Raleigh. Rachel hugged me before I even reached her front porch. "You look exhausted." "I haven't slept." "You don't have to explain, just come inside." That evening, after Emma finally fell asleep in a borrowed portable crib, I called Daniel. He answered on the second ring. "Hey, babe." "Someone was inside the house last night." Silence. Then he asked, "Are you okay?" "Physically, yes." "What happened?" I explained everything. The noises, Emma crying, the missing minute, the recovered footage. When I finished, he was quiet for several seconds. Then he asked something I wasn't expecting. "Did you actually see anyone?" I frowned. "What?" "On the video." "Yes." "I mean, could you tell who it was?" "No." Another pause. "Maybe it was just corrupted footage. The technician watched it." "I'm just saying not to jump to conclusions." I stared at my phone. Not once had he asked whether Emma had been frightened. Not once had he asked if someone had touched her. Instead, he wanted to know exactly what I had seen. After we hung up, I couldn't stop thinking about that. The next morning, while Rachel made pancakes for Emma, I sat at her kitchen table with a yellow legal pad. At the top, I wrote one question. "Who has a key?" I listed every name I could think of. Melissa. Daniel. Linda Carter Daniel's mother. And one more. Rick Lawson. Rick was a retired contractor and one of Daniel's oldest family friends. He'd helped remodel Emma's nursery before she was born, and had worked in our house for nearly 3 weeks. I remembered handing him a spare key so he could let himself in while I was on base. I couldn't remember if he'd ever given it back. That afternoon, while I was helping Rachel fold laundry, my phone buzzed. It was a motion alert from my front porch camera. I opened the app. Nobody was there, but sitting neatly on the welcome mat was Emma's stuffed white rabbit. I knew for a fact I'd packed it before leaving. Someone wanted me to know they'd been back. That stuffed rabbit sat on my welcome mat for less than 5 minutes before I called the sheriff's office again. A deputy drove over, photographed it, and bagged it for fingerprints. Nothing useful came back. Emma's fingerprints were all over it. Mine too. There were a few partial prints that couldn't be identified. Whoever had left it either wore gloves or handled it carefully. I couldn't stop thinking about one question. How had someone gotten inside the house without taking anything? They hadn't stolen jewelry. They hadn't touched the television. They hadn't even opened a kitchen drawer. They had walked into my daughter's bedroom and then walked back out. 2 days later, I drove back to Fayetteville while Rachel stayed with Emma. For the first time in my Army career, I didn't want to clear a building. My own home suddenly felt unfamiliar. I parked in the driveway and just sat there. The mailbox leaned slightly to the left like it always had. Mrs. Reynolds next door was watering her flowers. Nothing looked different. But everything felt different. Mrs. Reynolds spotted me and waved. "Honey, I've been worried sick about you." I walked over. "You heard?" "The whole street has." She lowered her voice. "I didn't want to bother you before, but I did notice something." "What?" "A white pickup." My heart skipped. "When?" 3 different nights, always after midnight. "You remember the license plate?" She shook her head. "No, just that it was an older Ford, white. It parked down by the empty lot instead of in front of your house." "Did you ever see the driver?" "No." She hesitated. But whoever it was knew enough to keep the headlights off. I thanked her and walked across the street to visit Mr. Harold Jenkins. Harold was 73, a retired Vietnam veteran who spent half his day sitting on his front porch with a cup of black coffee. He looked at me for a long moment before speaking. "You look tired, Captain." "I feel tired." He nodded toward the empty rocking chair beside him. "Sit." I told him everything. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he scratched his chin. "I heard your little girl that night." "You did?" "Sure did." "What time?" "Little after 2. "Did you hear anything else?" He thought for several seconds. "I heard a truck door close. A white pickup." "I couldn't see the color." "But I remember something else." "What?" "The engine." I waited. It wasn't loud. It almost sounded like somebody rolled the truck down the hill before starting it. I knew exactly why someone would do that. To avoid waking the neighborhood. That wasn't luck. That was planning. Back at my house, I knocked on 2 more doors. One neighbor had a Ring camera facing the street. We watched nearly an hour of footage together. At 2:07 a.m., a blurry white pickup rolled slowly past my house. No headlights. At 2:18, it drove away. The image wasn't sharp enough to read the plate, but I recognized the model. An older white Ford F-150. The same kind Rick Lawson drove. My stomach tightened. I called him that evening. "Melissa," he answered cheerfully. "How's the little one?" "We're okay." "I heard about the break-in." "It wasn't exactly a break-in." He chuckled. "Guess that's true. I need to ask you something." "Sure." "Were you anywhere near my house Monday night?" "Nope." "What were you doing?" "Fishing at Jordan Lake." "By yourself?" "Yep." His answer came too quickly. I drove to his house anyway. Rick was outside cleaning fishing rods. He smiled when he saw me. "You don't actually think I'd sneak into your house, do you? I don't know what to think anymore." He laughed. "Melissa, you've spent too many years in the army." I folded my arms. "What does that mean?" "You're treating this like some overseas operation." I froze. I had never told Rick how I'd searched the house that night. Not once. Not to him. Not to anyone. Yet somehow, he knew exactly how I'd done it. As I drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd missed something much bigger than a missing minute of video. I didn't sleep much that night. Rick's words kept replaying in my head. "You're treating this like some overseas operation." How did he know that? I'd never told him I'd cleared the house room by room. The deputies hadn't been there until after I'd finished. Rachel certainly hadn't mentioned it. Maybe he was guessing. Maybe. But the more I tried to convince myself, the less I believed it. The following morning, I requested a personal day from Fort Liberty. My commanding officer, Colonel Hayes, had known me for years. "You don't sound like yourself, Carter." "I'm dealing with a family situation, sir. You need another day after this one, take it." "I appreciate that." Instead of going back to Sandhills Security Solutions, I drove nearly 2 hours to Charlotte. A detective friend from the base had recommended a digital forensics lab called Carolina Evidence Recovery. They specialized in restoring damaged surveillance footage for insurance companies and law enforcement. If anyone could tell me what happened during that missing minute, it would be them. The technician introduced himself as Ben Alvarez. He looked to be in his early 50s and spoke with the quiet confidence of someone who'd spent decades solving impossible problems. "I read Leon's notes," he said. "Interesting case. I just need the truth. I'll do what I can, no promises." Ben connected my DVR to equipment that looked more like something from NASA than a repair shop. Hard drives spun. Progress bars crawled across 3 monitors. After nearly 3 hours, he rubbed his eyes. "I recovered a little more." "How much?" "Not much." He clicked his mouse. "About 8 seconds. My heart sank. "Only 8? I'm afraid so." He pressed play. The nursery appeared. The timestamp read 2:13:17 a.m. The bedroom door opened slowly. Not kicked. Not forced. Opened like someone who already belonged there. A person stepped inside. Their face stayed hidden beneath a dark baseball cap. They walked directly to Emma's crib. I couldn't breathe. The figure leaned over the crib. Emma stirred in her sleep. Instead of picking her up, instead of hurting her, the person gently brushed a hand across her hair. Just once. Almost affectionately. Then they stood there, watching her sleep. The clip ended. Neither Ben nor I spoke. Finally, he rewound the video. "Watch the feet." "What?" "The boots." I leaned closer. The figure shifted slightly. The camera caught a clear view for barely a second. Brown leather work boots. Heavy soles, a worn company logo stitched onto the side. Ben paused the frame. "Can you zoom in?" He enlarged the image. The picture became grainy, but the logo remained visible. A blue oval. Inside it, 2 words. Lawson Construction. I felt every muscle in my body go rigid. Rick had worn those boots nearly every day while remodeling Emma's nursery. I remember joking with him once because he refused to throw them away. "They're lucky boots," he'd laughed. Ben looked over at me. "You know somebody who owns boots like these?" "I know exactly one person." He didn't say another word. Neither did I. I thanked him, copied the restored footage onto a flash drive, and drove straight toward Rick's house. The entire drive I kept replaying those 8 seconds. The way the intruder had opened the door. The familiar confidence. The gentle touch on Emma's hair. Nothing about it looked rushed. It looked practiced. When I pulled into Rick's gravel driveway, my stomach dropped. The garage door was open. His pickup was gone. The porch light was on in the middle of the afternoon. I knocked. No answer. I knocked again. Still nothing. Just as I turned to leave, Mrs. Collins from next door stepped outside carrying a grocery bag. "You looking for Rick?" "Yes. He left early this morning." "Did he say where he was going?" She shook her head. "No." Then she frowned. "But he was loading boxes into his truck." "What kind of boxes?" "I don't know." She looked at me carefully. He seemed nervous. For the first time since that terrible night, I stopped wondering who had been inside my daughter's bedroom. Now I was wondering why he had suddenly disappeared. I drove straight from Rick's house to the Cumberland County Sheriff's Office. By then, I wasn't asking for help anymore. I was bringing evidence. Detective Sarah Collins met me in a small interview room. She looked to be about my age, practical and direct, the kind of person who listened more than she talked. I handed her the flash drive. This came from a forensic recovery lab in Charlotte. She watched the 8-second clip twice. When it ended, she froze the frame showing the work boots. "Lawson Construction," she read quietly. "Rick Lawson?" She nodded. "We'll bring him in." For the first time in days, I felt a small sense of relief. Maybe this nightmare was finally coming to an end. It didn't. 2 days later, Detective Collins called. "I need you to come in." Her voice told me everything before she finished the sentence. When I arrived, she spread several photographs across the conference table. Gas station security footage. Timestamps. Credit card receipts. Rick Lawson bought coffee in Sanford at 1:58 that morning. She slid over another picture. He was still there at 2:19. Sanford was nearly 40 miles from my house. Even driving well over the speed limit, there was no way he could have been standing beside Emma's crib at 2:13. I stared at the photos. There has to be a mistake. We checked 3 cameras. She pointed to another image. Then we checked his bank records. Another receipt. Another timestamp. The timeline holds. I leaned back in my chair. So the boots? They're real. But boots can be bought. Exactly. I felt something inside me collapse. For nearly 48 hours, I'd convinced myself Rick was the man. Now I had nothing. Detective Collins watched me carefully. "I know this isn't what you wanted to hear." "No, it isn't." Driving home, I questioned every decision I'd made. Had I let fear take over? Had I accused an innocent man because I needed someone to blame? That evening, Rick called. I heard the police came by. "They cleared you." They did. There was no anger in his voice, only disappointment. "I'm sorry somebody used my company boots to scare you." I closed my eyes. "So am I." There was a long silence before he spoke again. "Melissa, whoever did this knew your house." "I know." "And they wanted you looking at me." That thought hadn't crossed my mind. Until then. Someone had deliberately left clues pointing toward Rick. Someone smart enough to create a believable suspect. Someone who understood investigations. I barely slept that night. The following morning, Daniel called from Atlanta. "I've been thinking." "About what?" "The house." "What about it?" "You and Emma shouldn't go back." "I wasn't planning to." "No, I mean permanently." I frowned. "What are you talking about?" "We should sell it." "What?" "As fast as possible." "Daniel, we don't even know what's happening yet." "Exactly." He sounded impatient. "Melissa, you're never going to feel safe there again." His urgency caught me off guard. "Let's figure this out first." "No." "We need to list the house. Now." After we hung up, something about the conversation kept bothering me. Not because selling the house was unreasonable. Because Daniel usually hated making quick decisions. He spent 3 weeks comparing lawnmowers before buying one. Now he wanted to sell our home within days. It didn't fit. That afternoon, I decided to return to the house one last time. Not to move back, just to collect a few things Emma needed. The rooms felt colder than I remembered. Almost empty. I packed diapers, winter clothes, and a box of family photo albums from the hallway closet. As I reached for the last album, I heard a faint clicking sound. Tick, tick, tick. Not loud, just enough to make me stop. Military training teaches you to notice small things. I followed the sound into the nursery. It seemed to be coming from the air vent above the changing table. I grabbed a screwdriver from the garage and removed the vent cover. Something small was taped inside the duct, about the size of a deck of cards. A tiny camera. Still blinking. Still recording. Someone hadn't just entered my home. Someone had been watching us from inside it. And suddenly selling the house made a lot less sense than finding out who wanted us gone. I stood in Emma's nursery for nearly a full minute staring at that tiny camera in my hand. It wasn't much bigger than a pack of gum. Black plastic, a blinking green light, a tiny memory card tucked into the side. Whoever had hidden it had tucked it inside the air duct so neatly that I'd never have found it if it hadn't made that faint clicking sound. I slipped it into an evidence bag from my glove compartment and called Detective Collins. "I found something." "What is it?" "A hidden camera." There was a long pause. "Don't touch anything else, we're on our way." Less than 40 minutes later, detectives and crime scene technicians filled my house again. This time they weren't dusting doorknobs. They were pulling vent covers, checking smoke detectors, examining electrical outlets, and photographing every inch of Emma's room. One technician climbed down from a ladder. "Only one camera." "You're sure?" I asked. "So far." Detective Collins carefully examined the device. This isn't something you'd buy at Walmart. What do you mean? It was professionally installed. That sentence made my stomach tighten. Professionally. Rick had remodeled this room. Had he really been innocent? Collins must have read my face. We're not jumping to conclusions. I'm trying not to. She nodded. We're tracing the serial number. 3 days later, she called me back. We found the installer. I drove straight to her office. She slid a personnel file across the desk. The name at the top read, Kevin Moore. Who's Kevin? I asked. He used to work for Rick Lawson. I frowned. I've never heard Rick mention him. He probably wouldn't. She opened the file. Kevin was an electrician on the nursery renovation. Pictures of the project were clipped inside. There he was, a man in his early 40s, brown hair, heavy build, standing beside a ladder in Emma's future bedroom. I didn't remember him. I was deployed for 2 weeks during part of the remodel, I said quietly. Rick supervised most of it. Collins nodded. That fits. She turned another page. Rick fired Kevin about 9 months later. Why? Stealing tools. Anything else? She hesitated. Kevin has 2 prior burglary convictions. I felt my chest tighten. Burglary. Yes. But here's what's strange. She tapped another report. Neither burglary involved violence. What did he take? Nothing. I blinked. What? He entered occupied homes and stole nothing. The words hung in the room. He'd stay for a while. Watch television. Sit in the kitchen. Sometimes he'd leave before the homeowners even woke up. I stared at her. Why would someone do that? We've had psychologists look at offenders like this. They're driven by control. They enjoy being inside someone else's private life. A chill ran through me. Emma's room. The hand brushing her hair. The hidden camera. It suddenly made a terrible kind of sense. Detective Collins continued. When Kevin helped remodel your nursery, he had unrestricted access. And a spare key. I nodded slowly. We think he secretly copied it. My mind flashed back to the recovered video. He hadn't wandered through the house looking for valuables. He'd walked directly to Emma's room, like he'd rehearsed it. We've searched his last known address, Collins said. He's gone. Gone where? We don't know. She leaned forward. But Melissa, this is important. We recovered data from the hidden camera. My heart pounded. How much? Not much. The memory card automatically overwrote older files. What was left? She looked down before answering. Several short clips. Mostly of you leaving for work. You carrying Emma. Daniel mowing the lawn. Then she met my eyes. And one video, and recorded 2 weeks before the break-in. I swallowed. What was on it? You putting Emma down for her afternoon nap. Then leaving the room. I nodded. About 30 seconds later, she stopped. What? The nursery door opened. I felt sick before she even finished. Kevin walked in. He stood over Emma's crib. He smiled. And then he looked directly into the hidden camera, like he was proud of what he'd done. For the first time since this nightmare began, I wasn't just frightened. I was furious. Whoever Kevin Moore was, he hadn't chosen the wrong family. He'd chosen the wrong mother. Rage is a dangerous thing. In the army, I'd learned that years ago. Anger can sharpen your focus for a moment, but if you let it take control, it clouds judgment. And judgment was exactly what I needed if we were going to catch Kevin Moore. Detective Collins must have been thinking the same thing. You don't get to confront him, she told me during our next meeting. I know. You don't go looking for him. I know. If he contacts you, I call you first. She gave me a small smile. Good. I was hoping you wouldn't make me repeat myself. The investigation moved fast after that. The sheriff's office coordinated with the Fayetteville Police Department and the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation. Kevin's driver's license, financial records, and phone activity all suggested the same thing. He hadn't left town. He was hiding. More disturbing than that, detectives found evidence that my family wasn't his only target. 3 other homes in Cumberland County had hidden cameras installed during remodeling jobs over the past 6 years. None of those families knew they had been watched. Kevin had built himself a private world inside other people's lives. The more I learned, the angrier I became. One afternoon, I caught myself standing in Emma's empty nursery with a baseball bat in my hands. I didn't even remember picking it up. Rachel quietly stepped into the doorway. You okay? I looked down at the bat. No. She walked over and took it from me. I know you want to protect Emma. I failed. She shook her head immediately. No, you didn't. He got into her room. And you got him out into the open. I should have found that camera sooner. You couldn't have. I sat on the edge of the crib, suddenly exhausted. For 20 years I've planned military convoys through combat zones. Rachel squeezed my shoulder. And none of that prepared you for being a mom. That simple sentence broke something inside me. I cried harder than I had since Emma was born. Not because I felt weak, because I finally admitted I couldn't solve this alone. 2 days later, Detective Collins called. We're ready. For what? The trap. We met at the sheriff's office that evening. Around the conference table sat detectives, patrol officers, and one FBI behavioral analyst who joined the case because similar incidents had been reported in neighboring states. Collins spread photographs of my house across the table. Kevin studies routines. She pointed to the driveway. He waits until he believes the homeowner feels comfortable again. So we make him think I'm comfortable. Exactly. The plan was simple. Daniel would remain in Atlanta for another week, just as Kevin likely expected. Rachel and Emma would appear to move back into my house. Neighbors would see us unloading boxes. The lights would come on every evening. Life would seem normal again. What Kevin wouldn't know was that Rachel and Emma would leave before dark. A specially trained infant training doll would sleep in Emma's crib instead. Thermal cameras would cover every entrance. Plainclothes deputies would watch from neighboring houses. Detectives would wait inside an unmarked utility van parked 2 streets away. My job was the part everyone argued about. I stay in the house, I said. No, Collins answered immediately. He'll know if something's different. We're not risking you. I know this house better than anyone. The room fell silent. Finally, the FBI analyst spoke. She's right. Collins looked annoyed. I don't like it. Neither do I admitted. But if Kevin comes back, he'll expect to see me. After several minutes, she finally nodded. You stay, but you follow every instruction we give. I will. That Friday evening, Rachel helped me carry a few boxes inside while neighbors waved from across the street. By sunset, it looked as though Emma and I had finally come home. The house felt almost normal again. Almost. At 11:30 that night, detectives quietly escorted Rachel and Emma out through the back door. I kissed my daughter goodnight and watched the taillights disappear. Then I locked the door. For the first time in my life, I hoped someone would break into my house. I checked my watch. 1:47 a.m. The house was silent except for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the ticking clock above the stove. Every light was off. The only glow came from the baby monitor beside me. From the outside, everything looked exactly the way it had the night Kevin came. That was the point. I sat in the dark living room wearing jeans, a gray sweatshirt, and the same army boots I'd worn earlier that day. My pistol stayed holstered. Detective Collins had made one rule perfectly clear. If he comes in, you do not confront him. I know. You wait for my signal, I promised. Whether I could keep that promise was another question. An earpiece rested in my left ear. Collins's voice came through every few minutes. North side clear. Backyard clear. Motion sensors normal. Outside plainclothes deputies watched from 3 neighboring houses. A tactical team waited less than 2 blocks away. Still, my heartbeat refused to slow down. At 2:11 a.m., my phone vibrated. One word appeared on the screen. Movement. The backyard camera had detected someone near the fence. I looked toward the kitchen window. Nothing. The radio stayed quiet. Then, a faint metallic click. The back door, not forced, unlocked, exactly the way it had been opened before. Someone slipped inside. My hands tightened around the armrest of the chair. Slow footsteps crossed the kitchen floor. They weren't hurried. They weren't nervous. Whoever it was had walked through this house before. The hallway camera picked up a figure dressed in a dark hoodie and baseball cap. Even from a distance, I recognized the heavy work boots. Kevin, Collins whispered into my earpiece. Hold your position. Kevin walked past the guest room, past the bathroom, straight toward Emma's nursery. Just like before, he never hesitated. He reached the nursery door and slowly pushed it open. Inside the crib lay what looked like a sleeping toddler beneath a pink blanket. The training doll was convincing enough that even I'd done a double take earlier. Kevin stepped closer. Then something happened that none of us expected. He smiled, a gentle, almost grandfatherly smile. He leaned over the crib. In a soft voice, barely louder than a whisper, he said, "There you are." He carefully brushed the doll's hair. Then he added, "You're safe now." My stomach turned. A second later, he whispered something even worse. Mommy's gone. Every hair on my arm stood up. This man didn't think he was stealing. He believed he was rescuing children. Detective Collins's voice snapped through my earpiece. Go. The nursery exploded with movement. The closet door flew open. 2 detectives tackled Kevin before he could react. The bedroom window shattered inward as another tactical officer came through from outside. Kevin hit the floor hard. He struggled for only a second. What are you doing? He shouted. You're scaring the baby? There is no baby, Collins yelled. He looked genuinely confused. He twisted his head toward the crib. The blanket had slipped. The training doll stared back with plastic blue eyes. Kevin stopped fighting. He blinked several times. Then he looked at me. I was helping her. I stepped into the doorway. No. My voice stayed calm. You were terrifying her. He frowned as though he honestly didn't understand the difference. Outside, flashing blue lights filled the street. Neighbors opened front doors despite the late hour. People stood on porches in pajamas and robes watching deputies lead Kevin away in handcuffs. As he reached the patrol car, he turned back toward me one last time. You don't know what kind of mother you are, he shouted. I met his eyes. I know exactly what kind. The patrol car door slammed shut. For the first time in weeks, I finally believed Emma and I might actually be safe. Kevin Moore's arrest made the evening news before sunrise. By breakfast, every local station in Fayetteville had picked up the story. Neighbors who had slept through the flashing lights woke to reporters parked outside our subdivision. Satellite trucks lined the street. Microphones appeared where children usually rode bicycles. I hated the attention, but Detective Collins reminded me why it mattered. Someone may recognize him. She was right. Within 48 hours, the sheriff's office received more than 30 calls. Some came from homeowners who'd hired Rick Lawson's company years earlier. Others came from families who had experienced strange things they could never explain. A rocking chair that had moved overnight. A nursery door left open. Security cameras that briefly lost signal. One elderly couple from Hope Mills told detectives they'd always assumed they were becoming forgetful. Turns out, they weren't. Kevin had entered their home twice. The investigation grew far beyond my family. Search warrants uncovered boxes of hidden cameras, copied house keys, notebooks filled with addresses and photographs of homes across 3 North Carolina counties. There was enough evidence to connect Kevin to at least 9 illegal entries, maybe more. One afternoon, Detective Collins called. Melissa, we'd like you to be present when we interview him. I don't know if that's a good idea. You won't question him. I just think you deserve to hear something. I agreed. Kevin sat behind a metal table wearing an orange jail uniform. He looked smaller than I remembered. Not frightening, just ordinary. That somehow made everything worse. A detective placed several photographs in front of him. Families, children, front doors. Kevin looked at them without emotion. Finally, Detective Collins asked, Why Emma? He shrugged. I liked that house. Why? It was quiet. You installed a hidden camera. So? You entered while the family slept. They never knew. They know now. He looked genuinely confused. I never heard anybody. I couldn't stay silent. You stood over my daughter while she slept. He turned toward me. I was making sure she was safe. My daughter was safe until you walked into her room. For the first time, his expression changed. Not guilt. Annoyance. As a soldier, he said, you leave home all the time. You can't protect her every minute. Detective Collins immediately ended the interview. She didn't have to. Kevin had just admitted exactly what prosecutors needed to hear. Months later, his trial began in Cumberland County Superior Court. The courtroom stayed full every day. Families from other cases came to testify. One elderly widow cried as she described finding muddy boot prints in her hallway years earlier. Another father admitted he'd spent years believing his teenage son had been sneaking out at night. Neither family had known Kevin had been inside. When my turn came, I walked to the witness stand wearing a simple navy blue dress. Not my army uniform. This wasn't about my military service. It was about my daughter. The prosecutor asked me to describe the night of 2:13 a.m. Then he played the recovered video. The courtroom became completely silent. Even Kevin looked away. After 4 days of testimony, the jury deliberated less than 3 hours. They found him guilty on every count. As deputies led him from the courtroom, he glanced back toward me. This time, I didn't feel anger. I felt relief. Outside the courthouse, reporters gathered on the front steps. I stepped to the microphone for only a minute. If you're planning a home renovation, I said change your locks afterward. Check every room carefully. Trust your instincts. Mine probably saved my daughter's life. Standing off to one side was Leon, the security technician who had recovered that missing minute. When the cameras finally packed up, he walked over and smiled. "I've been waiting to tell you something." "What?" He shook my hand. "You believed your instincts when a lot of people would have talked themselves out of it." I smiled for the first time in weeks. "And you believed me?" He nodded. "Sometimes that's all it takes. People sometimes ask whether I moved. The honest answer is no. For a while, I thought about it. Every room in that house held a memory of what happened. Every creak in the floor made me stop and listen. Every time the wind brushed the trees behind the fence, I caught myself looking toward the backyard. But then I realized something. If I left because of fear, Kevin would still be controlling part of my life. And I was done letting him do that. The sheriff's office returned our house after the investigation ended. Before Emma and I moved back in, I made a few changes. Every lock was replaced again. Every security camera was upgraded. The old DVR went into a box in the attic. I couldn't bring myself to throw it away, but I never wanted to see it again either. The biggest change happened in Emma's room. I repainted the walls. The pale yellow nursery became a soft shade of sage green. Rachel helped me put up new curtains, and Daniel built a bookshelf beneath the window. We replaced the old rocking chair with one my father had made years earlier. Little by little, the room stopped looking like a crime scene. It became a child's bedroom again. Daniel and I had a lot to work through. When he came home from Atlanta, we spent several evenings sitting on the back porch after Emma was asleep. One night he looked at me and said, "I owe you an apology." "You don't owe me one." "I do." He stared out into the yard. "When you first called me, I kept looking for a logical explanation." "I know. I thought if I could explain it away, then none of it had really happened." I nodded. "That's what I wanted too." He sighed. "I should have trusted you sooner." I reached over and took his hand. "We both learned something." He smiled. "Next time you tell me your instincts are screaming at you, there won't be a next time." He laughed softly. "I hope you're right." A few weeks later, Detective Collins stopped by with coffee and donuts. It wasn't official, just a visit. She watched Emma toddle across the living room carrying a stuffed rabbit almost as big as she was. "The same rabbit?" she asked. The sheriff's office finally released it. Emma hugged it tightly and giggled. Collins smiled. "I like this ending better." "So do I." Before she left, she handed me a small envelope. Inside was a handwritten note from Leon. It read, "Thank you for trusting your instincts. Because you spoke up, other families finally got answers. You probably saved people you'll never even meet." I folded the note and slipped it into the family Bible my grandmother had given me years ago. That's where it still is. These days, Emma is older. She doesn't remember that night. She doesn't remember the investigation or the courtroom. To her, our backyard is simply the place where butterflies land on the flowers every spring. Sometimes, usually when I wake up in the middle of the night, I glance at the clock. If it happens to read 2:13 a.m., I don't panic anymore. I simply listen. Most nights, all I hear are crickets, a distant freight train, or the wind moving through the pine trees. Ordinary sounds, peaceful sounds, the kind I once took for granted. Looking back, I don't think revenge always means making someone suffer. Sometimes the greatest revenge is refusing to let the worst thing that ever happened to you define the rest of your life. Kevin wanted control. Instead, he lost his freedom. My daughter kept hers. If my story reminds you to trust your instincts when something doesn't feel right, then sharing it has been worthwhile. And if you've ever faced a moment that changed your life forever, I hope you know you're stronger than you think. Thank you for spending this time with me, and take good care of the people you love. The end.